Afternoon, everyone. This is the February 13, 2026 joint meeting of the New Hampshire Legislative Study Commission on the environmental and health impacts of per and polyfluorinated chemicals, as well as the Commission to Study Environmentally Triggered Chronic Illness. It is 2:07 p.m. and we are still lacking a quorum on the HB 737 side, so we're going to proceed past the minutes. And just a note on HB 737 commission membership, it's still not certain that Ray Brislin has been confirmed by the Senate, and we have Amy Costello here. Okay, so we are a quorum at same 2:07. So his status is not concerned, and Senator Magoo emailed me yesterday. He's no longer a member of the commission and has a new committee or commission appointment. And so we will need to find out from the Senate who will be taking his place. And before we move into our agenda, if you'll indulge me in a little reflection, almost exactly 10 years ago, on February 26th of 2016, a morning when I think all of us woke up with plenty to do and not looking for anything further to do. Edward Canning, who is the director for the Environment, Health, and Safety for Saint-Gobain, left a voicemail message and then sent an email to Sarah Pillsbury, administrator for drinking water and groundwater at the New Hampshire Department of Administrative Environment, to advise drinking water had tested positive for PFOA at the Saint-Gobain in Merrimack.
Okay, you saw that.
Since then,
okay, bye.
Have been working on this issue, and there's plenty more work to be done. But I do want to thank all of you for your efforts and concerns, and hard to believe it's been 10 years, and I'm afraid we may be looking at some of this 10 years down the road and still not be able to say we've done what we need to do. So having said that, we're very honored to have guests from our University of Arizona study. I say their University of Arizona study with us. I don't know if there is a spokesperson, but their paper has certainly galvanized interest. PFAS contaminated drinking water harms infants. I think we all can conclude that PFAS is not a healthful thing for anyone of any age to be ingested. And one of the questions that remains is, what is the adequate public health response? You know, some of our guidance in New Hampshire is to eliminate exposure to contaminated substances in drinking water, to perform routine blood panels when they should be performed, or routine urinalysis when it should be performed, and then to follow up as indicated on those things. But unlike other environmental contaminants with lead, where there is a dietary measure that can be taken to feed children leafy green vegetables, for example, here we really need some further guidance on the appropriate public health response as we note these issues. So I would like to turn this over to whoever will be presenting. Is that you, Ashley Langer?
It's me. I do not think I'm able to share my screen. We have a slide deck prepared, but I don't think I can share.
Is that something that Amy could give Robert permission to do?
Yes.
It is. And Amy, if you can hear us.
Yep,
please.
I'm working on it right now.
In the meantime, thank you all for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Which screen
I
are
think
you
we can
seeing?
see it, Robert. We can
presentation.
see your go-to support.
Ah, wrong screen. Let me move this over there. Now, can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So again, thank you all for inviting us to present this paper. This is joint work with Leslie Howden, Boguo, Ashley Langer, and Derek Lemoyne. The title of the paper is PFAS Contaminated Drinking Water Harms Infants. So before we get started, we kind of just want to set the scene on what PFAS are. So these are a group of synthetically made chemicals that have been emitted into the environment since at least the 1950s through their use in a variety of different manufacturing processes. So they're generally used in nonstick coatings, things like rain jackets, nonstick pans, and also firefighting foams. So in particular, the type of firefighting foam that puts out airplane fires. So one of the ways that these chemicals are emitted into the environment is, for example, during firefighting exercises. So you can imagine a Pease Air Force Base. They go and they light a training fire, and you have a bunch of firefighters spraying foam all over the place. And eventually this foam seeps into the soil, it travels through, and it hits the groundwater. And the very property that made it so useful in manufacturing, its water insolubility, makes it quite difficult to get rid of. So once it's in the water, it's earned its moniker forever chemical insofar as it has a very long half-life, and it's very hard to remove. So that's what PFAS are. What do we know about them? So there is an emerging science and epidemiology literature that's shown that PFAS correlates with a variety of negative health outcomes, including lower vaccine efficacy and kidney and testicular cancers. While we've found strong links between some health outcomes and PFAS, the relationship between PFAS exposure and reproductive outcomes has been a bit more mixed. So generally, this work has fallen into one of two camps. There's serum-based studies where you have an expectant mother who goes for, say, prenatal care, and the doctor enrolls her in a study and measures her serum levels throughout the pregnancy, maybe, and then relates these serum levels to the birth outcomes. The other kind of branch of studies has instead looked at population level correlations. So an example of this is, we know that there is a large amount of PFAS near Air Force bases, so you can look at individuals who live close to these Air Force bases and compare health outcomes to individuals that live a bit further. We're going to kind of argue to you why this doesn't exactly pick up the causal effect of PFAS, which is kind of the link that we're trying to draw in this paper. So again, the idea is that these correlational studies aren't going to pick up the effect of taking an average person and giving them more PFAS to understand how that would affect the health outcomes. Why is that? So we're going to give you 3 reasons. One is that individuals with kidney problems are also going to have higher levels of PFAS in their blood. The kidney issues are likely going to lead them to have other worse health outcomes. And if you just look at individuals without controlling for their kidney function, then it may be the case that you're looking at, or you're concluding that individuals with worse health outcomes are being driven by the PFAS in their blood, but really it's the kidney issues. This would come up in those serum-based studies. Another example is more so on the population level correlational studies, insofar as individuals that live in disadvantaged communities are going to have worse health outcomes for a variety of reasons that may be unrelated to PFAS exposure. So if, say, individuals that live close to Air Force bases are of lower socioeconomic class, they may have worse health outcomes, but it likely isn't going to be driven, or may not be driven, by PFAS, but rather the other confounding factors that are related to them living in a disadvantaged community, such as lower access to medical care. And finally, if individuals know that there are PFAS sites nearby, they may take preventative action. So individuals that stand to gain the most from this preventative action are the most likely to take it. And when you just compare individuals that live close to these sites to those that live a bit further, maybe the people who would be most affected have left. So you're not actually getting at the effect of PFAS on the average individual. So in order to estimate causal effects, you need variation that's as good as random. So you can imagine a lab study where you inject some rats with PFAS and other rats with no PFAS, and you compare the outcomes across the 2 groups of rats. Rats are not humans, and this tells us a lot, but it doesn't tell us how PFAS exactly is going to affect human health. And nobody's suggesting that we should be infecting humans with PFAS. So basically, you want to go into the environment and find a scenario where that variation in exposure to PFAS is as good as random. Why is this valuable? Well, in this case, you have that household baseline health and demographic characteristics are going to be similar across both the treated and the untreated groups. And the individuals wouldn't know that they were in either a treatment or a control group, so they wouldn't be able to take preventative action to mitigate their exposure to the chemicals. So in this paper, that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to understand what the causal impact of exposure to PFAS is on gestational, or rather on birth outcomes. So our strategy is summed up here. Basically, we're going to compare health outcomes of infants who are born to mothers who live near a contaminated site, are served by public wells, and have similar health and demographic profiles to those that are upgradient. The individuals who are downgrading to the wells in this setting are not going to know it. So they're not going to be able to move away. They don't know where the exact wells are, so they can't sort or filter their water. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures to kind of nail down exactly what it is that we're doing. You can imagine here that we have Pease Air Force Base in the middle of the figure. And over time, it emits PFAS into the soil, represented by the yellow dots. Over time, this PFAS travels through the soil and it eventually hits the groundwater table. Here we have two houses, but let's pretend they're wells. On the right-hand side, you see that the water has moved through or rather the PFAS has moved through the water and goes up into the well, whereas the well on the left-hand side does not share that characteristic. Basically, what we would be doing is we'd be comparing mothers who receive water from a well such as the one on the right to those that receive water from one such as the well on the left, controlling for the mother's characteristics, including the elevation of their well. Another picture. So here we have a site represented by the black dot. You can see that water moves in the direction of these blue arrows that are a little bit tough to see. We have three specific wells. We have an upgradient well represented in white, and you can see that water is moving down from the upgradient well to the site rather than the other way around. So we wouldn't expect that there is much PFAS, if any, coming from the site into the water supply of that upgradient well. So we would expect that on average, these upgradient wells should not have much PFAS as coming from the sites. We have a second group, the downgradient well, where the opposite is true. So you can see that the water is flowing from the site down to the downgradient well. We would expect that these would have higher levels of PFAS when compared to the upgradient well, which will be our control, and the downgradient will be our treatment. We have a third group, which is our off to the side wells, labeled in blue. Here, this is a well that is completely disremoved from the watershed of the site. We would expect that this has more PFAS than the upgradient well, but likely less than the downgradient well. We're going to be using this as kind of a second control group where we compare the upgradient wells to it. And we're also going to go through a robustness check where we use them as the control as well and show you that the results are pretty similar. So that's kind of our empirical approach in a nutshell. Let's talk a little bit about data and start off by talking about why we chose to look at New Hampshire specifically. So it really was a data limitation insofar as New Hampshire is great. It has a lot of data that we were able to exploit. It has data on PFAS contamination, birth outcomes, and well locations, which is vital to our analysis. So we're going to use these sets of information. There's going to be 5 of them, and combine these different data sets to inform our empirical approach. The first data set is the birth record data. So this is the universe of births from New Hampshire residents from 2010 to 2019. These are very rich data. We're able to see the latitude and longitude of maternal residence, which is vital. We are able to see the reproductive outcomes that we care about. Those are going to be infant mortality, length of gestation, and birth weight. We are also able to see a variety of maternal characteristics, including medical characteristics and prenatal care. We're going to combine these birth record data with data from the Department of Environmental Services, including the location of all groundwater wells that are used to service a public water system. So again, we can see where each of these wells are, but the mothers can't. We're also going to use data on the shapes of all areas piped to the public water system. So in a nutshell, what we're going to do is we're going to take the latitude and longitude of each maternal residence. we're going to overlay the shapes of all of the public water systems on top of these to assign each mother their particular public water system that services their water. Once we have that information, we are going to take the location of all the groundwater wells, including which public water system they supply, and assign mothers' wells. We're going to combine these data with locations of PFOA and PFOS, two particular species of PFAS, sites that have been known to be contaminating nearby water supply with these chemicals. There are 41 of them that we're studying in New Hampshire, and these are only large sites where we change what we mean by large and find that the results stay pretty steady. We have information on the maximum level of PFAS in nearby groundwater, and these come from the Northeastern University PFAS lab. Finally, we are using data on the PFAS test results in wells throughout the state. I'll explain to you how we use that when we get there. So our data approach, I've briefly touched on this, but just to kind of nail ideas, the first step is going to be to find the location of the well that services each mother's water. So what we'll do is we'll take the latitude and longitude of each birth where their mother lived and match it to the public water systems. We're going to drop all births that are outside of a public water system boundary and those that are matched to a PWS with no wells. Once we have the mother's individual public water system, we're going to then match the birth to the nearest well. So basically, we then proceed by dropping all births matched to domestic wells and those that are using surface water. And this is the hydrological approach. I really wish Bo was here to help me out with this, but basically the idea is that we are going to take each well and determine the watershed that serves it. So this is a valuable exercise insofar as we do know that groundwater flow correlates quite strongly with surface topography. This is something that Bo would tell you was shown in the 60s. We are going to validate this approach in New Hampshire just to show that the math checks out in this particular setting. We're going to classify a well as down gradient if there is some PFAS contaminated site in its catchment area. In layman's words, what that means is you take a particular point in space, this is going to be a well, and you drop a drop of water somewhere else in space. And if that drop of water would eventually travel to the well, then we say that it's in its catchment area. So basically, if there's a site where if you drop a drop of water at that site and it at some point in time would travel down to the well, then we're going to say that that well is down gradient of a PFAS contaminated site. On the other hand, we're going to classify as well as up gradient if it is in the catchment area of a PFAS contaminated site. So basically, if you drop a drop of water at the well and it would travel down to a PFAS contaminated site rather than the other way around. And if there are no contaminated sites in its catchment area, we're going to label this as up gradient. This is going to be our control group. We highlight that this is conservative insofar as we want to be very sure that our control group does not have lots of PFAS in its water. We look at this another way where we relax this definition and just say that there are no contaminated sites in its catchment area. And again, we find similar results. So that's how we build the data set. What do we do with it? So again, we want to estimate the causal effect of being served water down gradient to a PFAS contaminated site. So to do so, what we're going to do is compare health outcomes of babies that are born to mothers down gradient of a given site to those that are born to mothers who receive the water up gradient to the site. We're going to control for differences in demographics. So we argue that this should be plausibly random, but we do have a finite sample. So it's important to control for differences in demographics, maternal characteristics, and other potential confounders, including environmental characteristics. We show that they're very similar across different mothers in these different groups, but you still do want to control for that, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So these are what the results look like. So again, we are looking at infant mortality, low weight births, and preterm births. And what we're finding is that on average, a mother who receives her water from a down gradient well compared to an up gradient well has 191% higher chance of experiencing infant mortality. In terms of low weight births, so this is defined as a birth weight below 2,500 grams, we see 43% higher rates. Extremely low weight births, defined as birth weight below 1,000 grams, we see 180% higher rates. Preterm births, defined as a gestational period not greater than 36 weeks, we see 20%. And extremely preterm births, defined as a gestational period not greater than 28 weeks, we see 168%. And these results are quite robust. So what I'm going to show you here are a variety of different ways of cutting the data and estimating the sample, or estimating the empirical approach. And we find similar results across the board. So the top line in each of these categories is the baseline that I just showed you. The next one is where we drop all births who receive water from a well within 1 kilometer of a site. So we do this because that close to a site, it's hard to really pin down which direction the water is flowing. We find similar results, maybe a bit muted. Then we go and we drop all births after 2015. So as we started the session discussing, in 2016, Pease Air Force Base became known to have PFAS, and people likely became much more aware that this was an issue, and maybe they started behaving a bit differently, installing filters, etc. We find very similar results at this period, although a lot noisier insofar as we have less data. We drop border sites so that we don't have to worry about differences in state level policies. We find similar results. We relax the upgradient definition. So again, now instead of mandating that there must not be any PFAS sites in its catchment area, and it must be in the catchment area of a contaminated site, we just say that there can't be any PFAS sites in its catchment area. We find smaller effects here because now we are less certain that our control group doesn't have a good amount of PFAS in its water. No demographics, no medical controls, just changes the controls that we are including. We find similar results. Site fixed effects is interesting. What we're doing here is we are saying, rather than comparing down gradient births to up gradient births across sites, we're saying we're going to compare births to mothers that are down gradient of a site to births that are up gradient to the exact same site, and take the average across the sites. And we still find quite strong and significant effects. So is this plausibly causal? We think that there are two primary threats to this. The first is we really do need that in this finite sample that mothers that are served by down gradient wells are similar to those that are served by up gradient wells. And we find that, if anything, mothers that receive water from a down gradient well are of a slightly higher demographic or socioeconomic status. So if not for exposure to PFAS, you would expect these mothers to have better health outcomes, which is the opposite of what we find. Another potential issue is, what if we're misclassifying some wells? So maybe some of the wells that we say there are PFAS at actually don't have any, and the ones that we say there are no PFAS at, there is some. Economists have studied this pretty extensively. This is classical measurement error, and in the lingo, we would call this leading to attenuation bias. In words, what that means is that we'd underestimate the effect of being served by a down gradient well. So we would be showing you numbers that are smaller than what the true effect actually is. So now we have a binary measure of what is the effect of being served water from a well down gradient compared to up gradient. We want to take this a step further and estimate a dose response relationship. So the first step that we're going to take is we're going to estimate how, or predict how, PFAS moves through space in New Hampshire. So we're going to combine data on contaminated sites, DES test wells, and environmental characteristics to predict the level of PFAS, not just is there likely to be PFAS, but the true level at any given well. And importantly, this includes the ones that are not tested. So to just take a step back again, we're using data on test levels at wells where we know what the level of PFAS are, and using that information to predict the level of PFAS at wells that we haven't tested just yet. We're going to use the predicted PFAS at drinking water wells to understand this dose response relationship between reproductive outcomes and PFAS in New Hampshire. And these are what those results look like. So again, we'll focus in on infant mortality, any and extremely, and to maintain with the same set of results as in the last slide. We are looking at the effect on reproductive outcomes of increasing the level of PFAS in the median water supply by 100 parts per trillion. And this is of PFOA and PFOS again. We find that this increase in PFAS in their water supply leads to a 25% increase in the rate of infant mortality, a 6% increase in the rate of preterm births, an 8% increase in the rate of low birth weight births, And then again, looking at extremely, we see very high results, 43% increase in extremely preterm and 50% increase in extremely low birth weight with the same cutoffs as I discussed previously. So now we ask again, are these results plausibly causal? And we're going to talk about two main potential issues and argue that we don't think that they are driving the results. And then we'll talk about what kind of PFAS. So, you know, maybe it could just be that it's the effect of being down gradient in space rather than down gradient of a contaminated site. So what we did is we pretended that there were a bunch of random rather a bunch of contaminated sites throughout the state that were not really contaminated sites. But we pretended they were. We ran it through our algorithm, assuming that these were contaminated sites. And then we looked at the effect of living down gradient of one of these pretend sites on the health outcomes of interest, and we found that there is no effect. So it's not just being down gradient in general, it's down gradient of a contaminated site. Could it be non-PFAS pollutants? So pollutants that tend to correlate with PFAS are generally either 1, regulated, or 2, not suspected for reproductive harm. And with respect to the first half of this, we do find that, if anything, there are more violations of water quality standards in up-gradient systems than down-gradient systems, leading us to believe that along this dimension, the up-gradient wells are actually worse off than down-gradient ones. So what kind of PFAS? So again, I wish Bo was here to help, but there's 2 different types of PFAS species, short chain and long chain. Short chain are more recent. They're harder to get rid of via water filters. Long chain are older, and these are legacy chemicals. So the contaminated sites that we identified are for long chain PFAS. That's what they were testing for. Moreover, the site's age, given that they've been emitting these chemicals for a long time, and the fact that the public wells are using groundwater is also more consistent with long chain PFAS than short chain. There's work that shows that groundwater is more likely to have long chain PFAS in it, surface water short chain. Okay, so now we know how PFAS affects health outcomes in New Hampshire. We want to take this and try to understand what the national costs are like. So what we're going to do is predict PFAS levels at the centroid of each census block group in 11 states with PFAS testing. We're going to use the dose response function from New Hampshire and the number of births near each contaminated site to estimate the number of additional negative reproductive outcomes in these 11 states. And then we're going to use outside estimates of societal costs for each of these reproductive outcomes and the level of the population living near each of these contaminated sites nationally to calculate aggregate costs. And this is what that looks like. So this is in the 11 states. Again, what we're doing here in blue is we're plotting the number of additional births with each reproductive affliction. And in red hatched, we're giving you costs in $1 billion. So in terms of infant mortality, we see 399 additional births in these 11 states per year. This corresponds to about $1.7 billion again per year. Moving our way to low birth weights, low weight births, we see that very low weight births, there would be about 261 additional, and this corresponds to about $460 million per year. Extremely low weight births, there would be about 847 additional of these in these 11 states per year, corresponding to $2.2 billion. This is only in the 11 states. We'd like to be able to give an estimate nationally. Nationally, there hasn't been much testing, so we're going to make some assumptions about the prevalence of these sites being similar in other states, just to give you a rough back of the envelope about how much we should expect the societal cost of PFAS to drive nationally per year. And this is what that looks like. So when we calculate costs for preterm births, we don't include the increase in mortality, so we're able to add those 2 together when we give you this cost. Low birth weight has that baked in, so we keep it separate. Nationally, in green hatches, we see that preterm births and mortality generate about $5.6 billion per year, and low weight births generates about $8 billion. So to wrap up, gestational exposure to PFAS causes reproductive harm. It increases the rate of extremely preterm births by 168%. It increases the rate of extremely low weight births by 180%, and it increases the rate of infant mortality by 191%. These sites are all over the place. In other words, the widespread prevalence of these release sites is going to lead to significant societal costs. To compare, we found that 1 year of these costs are greater than outside estimates of the annual cost of complying with the recent EPA rule. Thank you.
First of all, any other members of the research team like to comment or add to the presentation?
I think that Robert did a great job of describing our approach and what we find. We're happy to help with questions that the commissioners or others have.
Okay,
It's-
so we'll open this up to questions. And anyone? And I'm not seeing hands, but Gary, yes, you're trying to.
I apologize. I've been rather tied up with other legislative stuff with et cetera. But anyway, I have not had a chance to really give it the full attention I would like. Will this commission look at this again later on and have further discussion just for my own edification? Do you anticipate that? I'd like to be able to look at it in detail. Will we have the slide deck available for our review?
Yeah,
That would be helpful. And I'd like to spend a little more time at it. And that's entirely on me. I apologize. I didn't have a chance to pull up the original, and actually I tried, but I got blocked by PNAS for some
Yes,
reason.
you all need a copy of the paper to distribute.
I would like to have a copy myself.
And
We
if
can do that.
you send it to me, I will circulate it. Also, the
Super.
slide deck, that would be greatly appreciated. And we certainly can come back to this at a later meeting. And carry
So
the,
I had a question.
yeah, I'm busy cluttering my screen, so that's the question. Wendy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This isn't a question as much as it's a comment. I spent this last week working on a bill of mine, which is preventing sludge on agricultural land in New Hampshire if it has PFAS in it. All sludge has PFAS, so essentially it would be a ban of putting sludge. And the constant feedback that I get from people is PFAS is in everyone and it's everywhere. So what are we going to do about it? I mean, they're sort of throwing up their hands and saying, you know, there's nothing we can do. It's everywhere. It's in us. And so research like this is so compelling, and it's so very, very important, because there's a lot we can still do about PFAS, you know, in our bodies and in our environment. And we have to still keep working on it because it is devastating. PFAS is devastating. So not a question, just kind of a comment.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Robert, for this great presentation and translating some very technical information into something that was pretty much hopefully understandable, but I'll definitely digest more if I get a copy of the paper. But a question, you said at the beginning that you had collected serum samples from the mothers. Did you, but it seems as though your data was driven just by the location of where the mothers were. And I was wondering what the effect was of the serum levels, if there were some mothers that had higher serum levels of long chain, and, you know, did that have any effect on your data?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. So the serum studies were more so us trying to describe what has been done in the past. So we didn't use serum studies in ours. We didn't have access to any data like that.
Okay. And were there any, did you ever survey any mothers? I was just wondering if there were some people that maybe rely on bottled water anyway, or they have home filters, or would that data pretty much wash out because of you'd make assumptions that the mothers that are upgrade would have the same percentage of types of water they ingest and those downgrade?
Yeah, that last half is perfect. That's exactly what we'd be assuming. And the fact that the mothers don't know that they're exposed is why we would feel comfortable making that assumption.
That's true. Okay, thank you very much.
I think just to add to that response, you know, to the extent, especially post 2016, that mothers have some concern that they may be exposed. If the down gradient mothers are drinking bottled water more, that would make our estimates conservative, right? So the effect might be even larger. The fact that we don't see a change around 2016 speaks to us that maybe there's not differential, that the down gradient mothers are not responding by filtering more or drinking bottled water more.
And I just have one more question. Have you seen, since your report's been issued, that there's been any has it had any regulatory or legislative impact in other parts of the country?
So we're only 2 months in to having it public. PNAS doesn't allow us to publicize before the paper comes out. So we have had inquiries, mostly media inquiries from around the country. We do not believe this is a New Hampshire specific problem at all. And in some ways, you all are particularly well positioned to do something about it because you have the information to know what PFAS levels look like in wells. And in many of these other states that we're looking at, they're far behind New Hampshire in terms of testing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Cazal, did you have a question? I see your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to comment about when Wendy said one of the answers to that is bioaccumulation. So you don't know how your genetics are going to interact with these drugs. Everybody's different, and at some point there's the last straw. So yes, we might be exposed, but one doesn't know at what point are things going to tip over and disease start. And the limiting bioaccumulation is a better approach than gambling and throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I did see some other hands up. Lorraine, go ahead.
Thank you. Just I want to comment when you talked about that 2016, that you were wondering about that. I think it's important to note that while we learned in 2016, in this area, vast area, that we have been drinking contaminated water, the state was going by the EPA health guidance, which was by no means adequate. And people were still being told, even in pregnancy at public meetings, that the water was safe to drink. And so it was about 2019 that public awareness really kind of came to a different place with the MCLs and the process in New Hampshire and a lot of citizen advocacy educating people. So I appreciate that you looked through 2019 for your data, because I think it's a valid time. And we look at the kidney studies that have been done here, they're using a similar range for various reasons. So I do have a question. I'm aware that you're getting a lot of pushback, and I'm a social worker. I'm not an academic and scientist or epidemiologist by any means. And I like that you thought out of the box a little bit, just personally as a lay person, because I think, when we look for funding the gold standard studies over the last decade, no one's funding anything like that. And we're not getting any answers. And the benefit of finding out information like this is so you can prevent, right? The public health guidance to say, even for OBGYNs and everyone, to really start messaging with maternal situations that we really need to be looking at point of use RO systems, and this is something we can't control for. That being said, I am aware that you're getting a lot of pushback. You must have been hearing it, things about this isn't really the way that we do causality for health outcomes in a traditional sense, not having an epidemiologist necessarily in the team. This is just hearsay what I'm hearing, and various things that are by academics. Those are valid comments to make, but as a layperson, what you're saying really does resound with me, because in the 9 communities in this area, I've talked to countless people, and I'm a clinical social worker in the area also. So anecdotally, what I see for reproductive disruptions in this area has been very overlooked. So what are your comments here for our record as to the pushback that you're getting about the validity of your peer-reviewed paper? I'll go off mute and just wait for your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine and Dr. Gazelle. I want to reply to one thing before, and maybe I'll turn it over to Ashley for the second half just to split it up. But I want to reply to what you're saying about OBGYN guidance and what Dr. Gazelle was saying about bioaccumulation. We did do an analysis that we didn't go into in depth in the presentation, where we don't have data on the mother's full history of residences. We can at least see how long they were at the residence they were at when they gave birth. And so, the numbers start getting low, but we can divide the sample based on mothers who were there for shorter or longer amounts of time through their pregnancy. And we find broadly similar effects. So there's suggestive evidence that the effects were worse for mothers who were there for longer in the pregnancy, but the effects are broadly similar. At some level, it's reassuring because it does suggest that short-term interventions like cleaning your water or filtering water or taking avoidance behavior of some other sort, that you're not locked in necessarily. Like things that you can do in the shorter run might matter for your ultimate reproductive outcomes. We can't nail that, but it's at least suggestive evidence that short-run actions can matter. And I'll turn it over to Ashley for the second half.
Okay, great. So yes, we have had conversations with a variety of people, some of whom are on the call, or I'm sure are in the public audience on the call. Let me say first, of course, we went through the peer review process. I think we had close to 100 pages of back and forth with peer reviewers that, were asking all these types of questions, right? That were asking us questions about, well, what about, is it just downhill? Is it that the demographics are different? Is it, all of these questions? And there's nothing in the peer review process that guarantees you that a paper gets published. You have to satisfy the reviewers. So that's item one. I think item two is, as a researcher, as an academic researcher, my goal here is to better understand what's going on in the world and to encourage others to do the same. So I would not in any way say that this should be the last paper on this topic. This should be part of a body of evidence that is brought to bear on these questions. And that evidence is going to be brought by all sorts of people, including epidemiologists, including, as Robert was suggesting, lab scientists who are, using animal studies. So we think of this as being, I was once told that academia is like, adding your grain of sand on top of the mountain of knowledge. This should be a grain of sand that should be taken as information about the potential harms. But I think more research, we could only focus in on certain health outcomes for infants. There's been the suggestion that there could be health outcomes for all of us, no matter what the age or life station. We can't get at that with this study, so we encourage others to do that. What we're doing here, though, is, you're absolutely right, that we are trying a different approach to get at causality. And we are trying to bring what is called in some areas a natural experiment. We don't want to expose people to different amounts of PFAS. We would love it if no one was exposed. But given that people have been exposed differentially and potentially in ways that they weren't aware of, can we learn something from that? And so this is trying to uncover these types of natural experiments is a very common thing to do in the literature. This particular approach is new, and so it should be put through its paces. We encourage it to be put through its paces, but also we think it should be taken as a serious point of evidence.
Amy, go ahead.
Hi, Ashley, thank you for your comments. And I think sort of along those lines, I think you described some of the limitations of the study, but maybe more to the point of the peer reviewers. What were some of the greatest criticisms, and what do you plan for next steps to overcome those, or refine sort of the knowledge, add more grains of sand?
Yes, well, so let me say, in the peer review process, we have to address all of the comments that the reviewers bring up before it can be published. So we can pass you not only the published paper, but also, unfortunately for you and for us, the nearly 100-page appendix that responds to all these peer review.
I love minutia.
Yes. So as Robert was pointing out, there was this question of, is it just that everything flows downhill? And so, this is just downhill in a down gradient, downhill in a groundwater sense, is going to have more of every sort of contaminant. And so Robert explicitly did this check where he just said, is it just down gradient of any particular position you would have gotten this? And it's not. We were also pushed very hard on questions of how do you know that it's PFAS, PFOA, PFOS? And Robert addressed some of that in terms of the short chain versus long chain. One of the things that I found interesting, I can't say whether it's surprising or not, but the fact that the public water systems that take their water from down gradient of these sites relative to up gradient have very similar compliance histories with the drinking water legislation. That at least suggests that this is not something like those systems are being maintained in a different way, or that they're particularly, not changing out the filters when they're supposed to, or anything like that. So yes, I'll send you this supplemental information, which gives you tons of minutia. Let me say, I think we are talking amongst the team and including with others, including epidemiologists, about what the next set of work might be. We don't know yet. I will say, we're not quite there yet. We feel very strongly that we are interested in making sure that we're keeping an eye on causality, that we're trying to understand things that could help commissions like these to understand if we were able to reduce the levels of PFAS in water, what might the impacts be? And it's tricky, right? It's hard to find places where you can find these types of natural experiments. So, at the same time, we don't have to or want to be the only ones doing this work, right? We are encouraging, and we are part of a community across the country that is thinking about these types of issues. And so, we are presenting to those communities, to those sets of academics that are doing broader types of work to try to put more grains of sand on that mountain.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments for our presenter team? Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. So it's over a long period of time. 10 years is a considerable amount of time. Were there other health policy changes that you guys took a look at? I know you controlled for a lot of factors, and I think that was one of the criticisms that at least I've heard of the study, that so much is controlled that it's difficult to draw a conclusion. But did you kind of look at changes to Medicaid policy, changes to health policy, things like that or control for those?
We did do this to some degree. So we have what are called month fixed effects. So basically what we're doing is we're implicitly comparing births to mothers in the same month. So to the extent that there were policy changes that were rolled out that would affect all the mothers in our sample at different times, we're sort of wrapping that in. Like that should be absorbed by our quote unquote month fixed effect. So we're not comparing a mother who gave birth in 2010 who was down gradient to mother who gave birth in 2019 who was up gradient. We're comparing mothers who gave birth in the same month. One was down gradient, one was up gradient. So they should have comparable broader health environments for the most part. And we do the same thing at the county level too. So any sort of county policy should really be absorbed in the same type of way. And that's really critical. I mean, the controls, I'm not sure I totally follow about being hard to interpret because of the controls. The controls are really this reassurance that there aren't these other things lurking in the background that we're not picking up. And we do try dropping them and putting them back in and making sure things don't move in a way we don't expect. But the controls are reassuring that even after taking out these differences among counties and across months of the year and across years and all that, that we still find an effect. And after housing characteristics and prices and topography and all that, we still get an effect. It makes it more reassuring that it's not something else that we just didn't think about.
Mm-hmm. So what was the sense? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, let me add one more thing that sort of answers part of Amy's, but also comes back to Lorraine's point. So I do not think our results should be interpreted in any way as saying that in New Hampshire, PFAS has increased infant mortality by X 100%. That is not what we're saying. We are looking at a very small, you have to be within 5 kilometers of one of these contaminated sites. You have to be, we have to compare the ones who are up gradient and 2 kilometers away to those down gradient and 2 kilometers away. So I would be very careful as a commission to take these results and say, this is having some massive impact across everyone in New Hampshire. The reason we are limiting ourselves to that, and that's why we're putting in all those controls, is to really try to get at that causal effect where these mothers are very similar. But it's true that if you want to know what the overall effect across the state of New Hampshire is, you need a much more detailed study than what we've done here, and you would have to think about other ways to get at a broader sense of causality. Sorry, Amy, I know I cut you off.
You all set, Amy?
I think so. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I want to thank all of you for presenting your paper. And if you can, sorry for that interruption. If you can forward me a copy of the paper, the peer review appendix, and the slide deck, I will make sure that gets out to everyone.
Fantastic.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Chronic illness commission members, feel free to stay with us, but we're going to proceed to our regular agenda. And at this point, get an update from Mike Wimsatt from DHHS.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. I have got a little bit tight schedule. I got to get off this call in about 10 minutes. So, but I'm going to go through my usual update, but just kind of hit the highlights of what have changed. I usually end up repeating a fair number of things that have been discussed the previous month. So the notes will be complete and all the information will be there, but I'm just going to go to the highlights here. So as far as the facility closure goes, we've talked about that at length over the last several months. We are expecting a final demolition and decommissioning report to come from Saint-Gobain, and they've indicated that they anticipate submitting that report in the coming weeks. So hopefully the next time we meet, we'll have something to share with you on that. They are also still doing work on potential leaching from the concrete slab, and we're still waiting for that information as well. As far as POET system installations, as of February 4th, there have been 828 POET systems that have been installed, and about 790 of those have completed their testing regimen to be considered complete officially. With regard to the town of Londonderry, where we still have a lot of water line connections that we're hoping to accomplish, that I was hoping I'd have something final to report to you for this month's meeting, but it's going to be a little bit longer. But we believe that between the town and Saint-Gobain, negotiations are very coming to a close, and that we're very hopeful that there will be a agreement on some water line installations very soon. So as soon as we have that, we'll be sure to share it. On that note, also, DES participated in a public meeting that was held in Londonderry on January 28th. We provided information on the various municipal water projects that are planned and currently underway in the town. And also the DES representatives attended to discuss the benefits of municipal water, provide information on the PFAS removal rebate program that we administer for private wells, and to answer questions on the overall project. So that was, I think, pretty well received and well attended. As far as water supply well sampling, I think we've certainly talked about Saint-Gobain conducting long-term monitoring of drinking water wells under a groundwater management zone work plan. And that would support implementation of ultimately a groundwater management permit with a supporting groundwater management zone. The company began conducting monitoring under that work plan at the end of January of last year. And in general, the work plan proposes to conduct sampling so that by the end of this year, there'll be 6 PFAS sample results for each property that's eligible for sampling. So we'll have some repeat sampling that's been completed. And at this point, the plan was reviewed and approved by DES last January. And as of February 4th, Saint-Gobain has sampled approximately 1,560 wells and our properties. that were eligible for monitoring under the work plan. And the program slowed down a little during the holidays, as often happens. There were only 34 samples collected during the month of January. But they anticipate ramping up sampling again this month and in March to approximately 100 to 200 properties per month. And that should help them, meet the requirements of the work plan. Since the start of sampling associated with that work plan, about 170 additional properties have been identified as exceeding the ambient groundwater quality standard and for PFOA, and they've been offered bottled water and an eventual permanent remedy. Then moving on to the remedial action plan and the site investigation for the site proper, for the plant site. Saint-Gobain, as you know, we had received a remedial action plan that we did not approve, and they've been working towards getting something that we can approve. And in support of that, they proposed to do some additional work to help inform them as they try to prepare a better remedial action plan. And to that end, they installed temporary monitoring wells and conducted soil sampling in accordance with the work plan that they'd given us back in December. The 2 rounds of groundwater sampling have now been conducted on the temporary monitoring wells, and Saint-Gobain has indicated that the results so far are consistent with their understanding of groundwater and soil conditions in those areas. They've indicated they will reach out to us after all the data is received to coordinate a meeting to discuss the groundwater and soil results and how they'll fit into an addendum to that RAP. So we're still plugging away at that. DES reviewed the groundwater summary report from August and a groundwater data transmittal for sampling that was conducted during the second quarter of 2025. Those reports document groundwater sampling at the former facility, so again, the plant proper, and the directly adjacent parcels. Based on our review, we issued a letter just early this month on February 2nd, and there'll be a link to that in the notes, that would request expanded groundwater monitoring this calendar year to evaluate potential changes in groundwater quality following demolition of the former facility and also redevelopment of some adjacent parcels. So we're looking at a little bit more intensive groundwater monitoring to understand any impacts or changes that may be occurring as a result of the demolition and nearby development. And that's a whirlwind tour of the new information. Again, the notes for this will include all the usual information along with links to a number of the relevant documents, as well as the graphics and bar charts regarding our progress in getting POET installations and water lines completed. And I'll leave it at that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
How much time do you have, Mike?
I got about another 5 minutes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so let's be quick. Lorraine?
Just a very quick question. When you talk about the ground monitor wells on site, are you going to be able to give a link to that data? Do you have that data, or will there be a report posted on One Stop that we can look at? Because I think that would be of interest to a lot of entities that are working to filter and our engineers in town.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. Andy pulled this together. I'm not sure if there's a link. There's a link to the letter that we wrote, but I'll talk to Andy and make sure that we get a link to the groundwater summary report so that you can look at that as well.
I think that data would be probably helpful to the MVD engineers in our town. Thank you.
It may well be that that's already been in a previous set of notes because we received that summary report back in August. So but I'll check with Andy and make sure that we get a link to in this document so that you'll be able to click on it.
Wendy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Mike, this follows again the conversations that we've had in the committees about my sludge bill on agricultural land. And we've been asking for produce testing for so long. And DES basically got up there, Ren got up there and said, they don't have the money, they don't have the people, they don't have the resources, that kind of stuff. Could we force Saint-Gobain to pay for produce testing in the area because they contaminated the area and it's a realistic concern and expense?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I can take that up with folks here, certainly.
Thank
Gary?
you. I would really appreciate that.
Gary,
Just
go
a
ahead.
quick question, just a real quick question. The data you've collected relative to the prevalence of contaminants in the wells, was all of that data of any value to the people that wrote, that we just heard the presentation? Did they use that data?
I think, I don't want to speak for what they did or didn't do. I'm not aware, that my understanding is they said they coordinated with DES. I believe that coordination extended, was to the extent of that coordination was essentially doing a FOIA request for data of some sort. I don't know what they did with that data. I'm not aware of any specific coordination with our staff. I mean, I think frankly, the information that we have, we could have provided a lot of additional information to them, but I don't think that was.
It seemed like you had a wealth of data there that might or might not have been utilized.
I think that's right. And we do have some, pretty significant concerns about that I think I've expressed, and we've issued a statement on that, but I won't raise that here.
Mike, sorry.
Go
This
ahead.
is Amy. Mike, just to be helpful, there is an email address that was listed as the point of contact for DES, if you want me to send that along.
Sure.
Okay, other questions from Mike? If not, we'll let you go. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Have a good weekend.
Colleen, there you are. Anything new from DHHS?
Hi, good afternoon. So I just had a couple updates. At the last meeting, there was a question asked about the Rural Health Transformation Grant and whether or not any of that funding would potentially could be used for PFAS remediation. Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The New Hampshire applied for a grant through the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and there was a very specific scope that was put forth in that application for what funding could be used for, and PFAS remediation wouldn't have been eligible for grant funding. And I can certainly put in the link what was included in that grant application, but again, PFAS remediation wouldn't have been eligible for that funding. The other update I wanted to provide you all is, I'm not sure if the commission is aware that the department collects data for bottled water registrants. So every in-state and out-of-state provider of bottled water is required to register annually with the state. And even though bottled water doesn't have a PFAS MCL with it, the state does hold those registrants to the requirements for drinking water. And so we monitor annual testing results they submit to us. And so that is due December 31st, those applications. So the department has reviewed the annual registrations we have currently 169 different facilities registered, and that encompasses 462 different types of water that those facilities distribute. And so I'm happy to report that none of the results that we received were above the current MCLs. And in fact, only 3 had any detections at all, which were below both the state standard and the EPA MCLs for drinking water.
Okay. Good to know.
And happy to, that's all the updates I have. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colleen. When you say types of water, can you give some examples?
So these would, it's bottled water, so it could be spring water, it could be mineral water, distilled water, any type of bottled water. It wouldn't include things like flavored water; those aren't required to submit test results to us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, I may have missed this. Did you say this is an annual report about the water?
They're required to send us annual testing results, yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And can we get a copy of that somewhere?
We don't publish that. We just house that in our own database, but I can look at, we can provide a published summary of those reports.
Well, I would like that because I constantly get asked by people which are the safe waters to drink. So if we could get that information, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Chris, I have another question.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Colleen, any of the work that DHHS does relating to PFAS, has that been impacted by the back of the budget cuts?
I can't comment on that off the top of my head. I mean, certainly we are not only the back of the budget cuts, but the hiring freeze right now is it has certainly diminished our capacity to do certain things. And then also, we have had some changes in federal funding, so that does impact our resources as well. So we're trying to do the best we can, but we do have vacancies across many different program areas that have had us make decisions to shift our capacity to do things that we have done in the past.
Amy, I'm sure that's true for you.
I was just going to ask, so whereas this commission is specifically interested in chronic conditions, were there staffing changes within that department specifically, or that division?
I can get back to you on the exact impacts, but every program within public health has had some impact of diminished staff, not either through federal funding cuts or through just in the hiring freeze that's happening right now.
Yeah. And are there any impacts from reassignment of work based on rural health transformation?
So that is following a different track, so that there's a little bit more freedom to hire externally with staff that have moved from public health to the rural health transformation work. But however, there is, I think the true effects, we're still waiting to see how those play out, because they're just standing up that workforce for rural health transformation.
Thank you.
Gary?
Just an FYI, I sit on the Health and Human Services Oversight Committee, and this is a topic of interest. And we will be continuing to follow just this issue. So just a FYI, I can maybe add some, and you may be working with the commissioner to keep us up to date.
Yes, definitely.
Lorraine?
I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but I think on the last call, I heard that after questioning about the website and finding information, did I hear that you or someone say that the entire Department of Environmental Health at DHHS has been eliminated or is not staffed right now? Do I have that right?
So we have had our environmental health tracking group that has had some staff reductions. We do have a few people as part of that group, but that has had some staff reductions. Certainly there's been a lot of uncertainty on continuing to fund that program, because a lot of the federal staff that administer that grant and administer that program they don't exist anymore. That it's been a very slash program at CDC.
I'm not sure if you can advocate for your own needs things are so lean right now, but there are some legislators and various people on here. So I don't know if it would be an appropriate ask to look at the funds the state's receiving and all these, against manufacturers and class action suits, whereas that money is going into the trust fund for water projects. But if we think about, support to health guidance and things that people need, so they can be equipped to protect themselves and just make good decisions, I'm curious if your department can make a request, or anyone can make a request, or maybe a legislator can make a request that some of the money in those funds can be used in that way. Because I remember in the beginning when we started doing the MCLs, the state DES had to have an epidemiologist and a toxicologist. And if I recall this correctly, they utilize and were granted, they asked for money from those funds, from the trust funds and whatever, money was there, and they were given that. So just putting that out there, it would be good to have some focused, support and guidance, given that this knowledge that we have everywhere. More homes are being identified, right, as they do the resampling. So we have newer families and younger families on bottled water, which may or may not be PFAS free. We don't seem to know that. And plastics, et cetera. And, they need health guidance. Everyone needs just the basic health guidance. So I don't know if that request could be made somewhere. I think that might be very helpful.
Amy, then Gary.
Colleen, just quickly, just to clarify, the environmental public health tracking funds from CDC are no longer available through CDC. Is that?
No, so we still do have that grant, but we do,
Okay.
there's a lot of uncertainty on the continuation of that funding, just because there's lack of counterparts at the federal level that are continuing to guide that work. And the data calls, the twice a year data calls have stopped through that program, just because they have a very bare bones staff at CDC administering that program.
And remind me once again, what size program was that in dollars and people?
So I'm fairly new to managing that program, so
if you want to get back
don't put, so Darling, I can certainly
No.
get back to
Yeah,
you.
why don't we do that? Because I think that would be better to have the facts to understand what kind of proposed legislation are we thinking about specifically. Yeah. Okay. Sorry,
Gary?
Gary. Oh, you're muted, Gary.
Sorry about that. This may not be a fair question for Colleen, but I wanted to ask the question. I was hoping that maybe Mike would still be on, as well as the authors that we had. And that's the recent maneuver by Trump to rescind the endangerment doctrine through the EPA, which can have unbelievable, at least my take, is that it will have unbelievable watershed in terms of availability for not only research funds, which he has shown that he really wants to rip almost everything he possibly can out. And after if in fact the endangerment is in fact fully rescinded, do you have any current sense, Colleen? And you may not, it may not have enough time to settle in, but I'm very concerned about this. And hopefully it will percolate through the court system, even if it does held up. But the Massachusetts versus, I forgot the such and such that the Supreme Court upheld initially to put this in really in the books, may have review again. Do you have any thoughts or?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with it being very, very fresh news. Certainly, we are open to having discussions with DES and understanding what the potential long-term impacts of it. But
It may be too early. I just was.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Colleen? Okay, guess not. If not, we are moving on. Anyone have an update on legislative bills that they'd like to share? Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, let's take up the minutes of the January 9th meeting. And again, if there's no objections, I will note abstentions based on attendance. But did anyone have any questions or comments on the minutes? Rosemary.
I just, spell check is not my friend, and it keeps changing my name to Rosemary, and I just want for the record to know that it's Rosemary.
All right, I did. Sorry. Anything else to correct? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes with those corrections.
And second by Gary. Any discussion? If not, I'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none, I will note abstentions for the minutes. I think that brings us to a close unless there's some new business.
I've got some.
Yeah, go ahead, Don. Thank you.
Thanks. I see some new faces. Those of you who don't know me, my role on this commission is for a citizen in environmental science. But I am also the chair of the Merrimack Village District Water Department. And I just wanted to mention a couple of updates. We've completed our water line installation in certain private well areas in town that are outside of the St. Gobain consent boundary. That being on Palmieri Drive, Girard Drive, and over at Farmer and Mason Roads. So we are actually we had a meeting Tuesday and we approved 2 warrant articles that are going to be on this year's at this year's annual meeting, and that's for 2 projects to extend water mains out to 2 more areas of town that are beyond the St. Gobain consent boundary. One of those areas is it's over by BB Lane. It doesn't actually include BB Lane in this particular phase, but it includes South Babusick, Trowbridge, Four Seasons. That's one project. And then the other project is going to be known as the Great Stone Mainline Extension, and that's Great Stone Drive, Old Road, Tomahawk Drive. So in total, we're looking at about 120 private wells that would be able to connect to MVD. The funding for those projects combined is approximately $7 million, which is pretty significant costs for those properties. However, out of that 7 million, it looks like just a little bit more than 2.5 million will be grant or forgiven loans. And then the rest of the amount is going to come from MVD. But one of the reasons we are able to do this is we're expecting unofficially just a little bit under $4.5 million of settlement money from the 3M settlement. That's the multi-district litigation case that has been resolved about a year or so ago. So that money will have to actually be applied to an existing loan that we have, but we're talking about refinancing that loan. But anyways, the main question I had for the commissioners is whether we will have to raise the rates, the water rates, to accomplish this. And right now I'm being told that it doesn't look like we're going to have to raise any rates because we have the money to cover it, which is good because, you know, a lot of customers were hoping not to raise the rates, in fact, trying to lower the rates. But it was unanimous with the 5 commissioners that we approved to proceed with this because getting people connected to the clean water is a high priority. The only thing I wanted to mention is out of those 120 properties, only about 1/3 of them responded. We went and put door hangers on the doorknobs of those homes, and for people to respond and indicate whether yes or no they would be interested in connecting to the MVD water system if we installed it down their street. But only 1/3 responded. In one case, there were 16 yeses, 9 nos. And on another case, there were 22 yeses and 2 nos. And I think some more have dribbled in since then, a little bit more in favor. So this is going to have to be approved by the voters at the annual meeting in March by a 60% majority, 3/5. So you know, it's going to be critical that the word gets out there. So a lot of us here in this commission in Merrimack, it would probably be good to help outreach on that. There'll be more information coming. We're having a public hearing on February 23rd. I think that's a week from Monday. Mm-hmm. So And then we're moving that to the annual meeting, so the actual vote's going to happen in March for the annual meeting. So that's just wanted to point that out, and you know, it's unfortunate that this is outside the consent boundary, so the burden is on us through, in this case, thankfully, there's other settlement money that's coming from 3M that helps with this, but you know, believe me, that money could be applied to future projects, future carbon media change outs that we're taking on in our budget now that we didn't have before. But the decision was made to proceed with these extensions. So this is going to be, you know, two projects done, 2 more in the queue. The design would probably occur over the summer, and I'm not sure when installation, probably the earliest would be in the fall or perhaps even in 27. So that's all I wanted to update everybody on.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Thank you. Don, first, I just want to thank you so much for all your advocacy for safe drinking water. I mean, from the salt issue to PFAS, you do so much great work, you and the rest of the MVD Commission. And I do want to make sure that the word gets out about this. Could you, on the 23rd, that public hearing, where and when is that going to be? And also the annual meeting?
Yeah, so the 23rd, the public hearing is at MVD's office. Typically, we get a very low turnout at the public hearings. So it's 7 o'clock on the 23rd.
Okay.
And the annual meeting, that's like the last Tuesday in March. Let me just check my calendar on that one.
30.
So that would be, yeah, the 31st, March 31st. That's at 7 o'clock, and that is in the high school, either in the cafeteria or, well, if it's the high school, it's in the cafeteria. That's where it would be.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Don, for those people that didn't respond, or they're just going to be curb stops, or how's that going to be handled?
Yeah, we typically would leave a curb stop at the road of every property, and the connection from the curb stop to the home is the burden of the homeowner. But as in previous projects, as you guys are aware, there is a $10,000 rebate, so that homeowner can get up to $10,000. Now, some of these homes have already installed water filtration. So if they've already paid up to the $5,000 rebate for their in-home water filtration POET systems, they're eligible for the difference between that and the $10,000. So if they only spent $3,000 on the POET, they're eligible for $7,000 more to get up to the $10,000 for the service connection. And there are some properties on here that have indicated that they do have POET systems. Some are willing to give those up and connect to MVD. Some are willing to just hold on to the POET systems. So in either case, whichever they choose to do, the curb stop will be there for them. And typically we bring that outside the pavement to the edge of the property, the pavement of the roadway, so that any future connection doesn't have to disrupt the roadway pavement.
Okay, well, good to hear about those water line extensions. It's
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Like I said, it's unfortunate the burden isn't on, you know, the polluter, whoever that is, but I guess indirectly in this case, 3M being the grandfather of all the PFAS is sort of on the hook for some of that cost, which is, you know, it's good to see.
okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Any other new business? Seeing none, I'll take a motion. Oh, next meeting, if I didn't say, it's March 13th, 2 p.m. on Friday. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Nancy, second by Gary. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone want to stick around? Any nays? No. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
weekend.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day, don't forget.
Oop.